Welcome to another episode of The Dissection. There are multiple reports that the first group of white South African refugees is scheduled to land in the United States of America this week. Going to America. You remember the movie by Eddie Murphy, Coming to America? This is part 3 of that, Going to America. Now it's being told from the white Afrikaner side of the story. Not going there as children of the king, trying to avoid inheritance and taking over the throne. No, this is as refugees going to this land of green cards and American citizenship to become Americans, and uphold the First Amendment and the Second Amendment. 49 people are going to be in the first group of refugees. Now, there's a debate that's going on online and in various media publications around the world about whether these applicants are real refugees. We'll talk about that later in the episode, and whether this actually is fair to other refugees and whether or not it is damaging to the international human rights law, particularly refugee law. So this number, 49, 7 times 7, seems astonishingly low to me. I think 49 is not the number I expected of people who would have taken up this opportunity within the first 100 days of it being offered to them. Just 49. Slow. To be honest, I don't think that many people intend to leave everything in South Africa and become refugees in the USA. Being a refugee is not easy. It's easy if you are a real refugee, if you're running away from a war zone, if you've been persecuted in your country. It's easy to become a refugee because that is much harder than sleeping with the constant fear of death and the constant lived reality day to day that you could die anytime as a result of war that is ongoing in your country. But I don't think that's quite the same thing that's happening in South Africa. I don't think that's quite the same thing. If you become a refugee, by the way, if you get refugee status, you can't go back to the country where you claim you were persecuted. You will have to leave and leave for good. I'll explain that further in the episode. But I think that in and of itself is what has made some people reluctant to leave, because people want to be able to enjoy being in America, but be able to come back to South Africa, be able to actually work in America, come back and spend their rands, go on the wine route, go on various holidays in Hermanus and all of these other places, go back and enjoy some safari, go to God's Eye. What is it called? What's that place called that they love in Mpumalanga, the tourists? People want to be able to do that. But if you say you're a refugee, that goes away. That goes away unless you give up your refugee status. I doubt that many people are going to leave Cape Town, Hermanus, Pretoria North to take up Donald Trump on this offer. I really don't think that he will see much adoption as time goes. Because you have to look at the data on income in South Africa to understand why I'm saying this. I'm not just saying this without looking at the data. White South Africans are doing extremely well in South Africa compared to the other groups. Look at the numbers on the screen. Just look for yourself and see. We are able to ascertain how people are earning income and how they're living based on the statistics that have been collected by Statistics South Africa. In January of 2025, Statistics South Africa released the 2022-2023 Income and Expenditure Survey, the IES. The data indicated that there are still large patterns of income inequality in South Africa. White-headed households had significantly higher income and consumption expenditure versus other population group. When you look at white-headed households, they had significantly higher median income as well and consumption expenditure versus other population groups. On average, white-headed households earn the highest income of 676,000 rands 375 per annum. That's an average amount, close to 700,000 rands a year, followed by Indian and Asian households, which were at 417,431, followed by colored-headed households, which were at 260,816, and black African-headed households, which were sitting at 143,632 on average. So if you look at those numbers, the average household income of white-headed households was almost 5 times higher than that of African-headed households and almost 3 times higher than the average household income of colored-headed households. Quality of life is very high for the average white South African. If you look at those income numbers, and this is now looking at the numbers, what does the data tell us? If you're getting 700,000 on per annum on average, you can afford private school, you can afford private security, you can afford to have a domestic worker, and sometimes you can afford to have a domestic worker and a gardener, even if you don't have those every day. Some people are not using those resources every day. They'll sometimes get a helper to clean 3 times, 2 times, gardeners to come in and clean once a week. People are using Sweep South. The options have shifted. But if we're honest, you can go to Woolies, you can have vacations, you can go to trips. These are things you can do with that kind of an income. But if you're making 143,632 on average per year, you're not going to be able to do much with that kind of money. You're going to be in debt. You're going to be in the debt cycle. You're going to be in poverty. And remember, these averages distort the other realities of the median income in South Africa, which is significantly lower than all of these numbers. Most South Africans are living in extreme poverty, 60% in fact. So the reality is, if you're living in South Africa, if you are a white-headed income earner, you're doing well. Even if you look at the unemployment data, if you look at unemployment by race in South Africa, according to the Statistics South Africa Quarterly Labor Force Survey, which are done every quarter, unemployment by race is disproportionately higher for black people than it is for other races. White unemployment is 9.2%, and black unemployment is at 46%. 9.2% versus 46% on the expanded definition. So I don't think that people are going to America. I don't think that they are. Not in high numbers. Young people want to do this. But older white South Africans who have property, who have mortgages, who have careers that are fulfilling, or even have senior positions, middle management positions, are they going to want to, people who've built their business in South Africa, whose customers are in South Africa, are they going to want to go to America at this particular point? I don't think so. I don't think so. And also, they'll also be victims of xenophobia in America. People will be telling them to go to Africa. People will be telling them that just going to America, you don't have the accent, you don't know the teams, you like rugby, you don't like football, you don't know the NBA. Do you know who Giannis Antetokounmpo is? Do you know who that is? Do you know who these people are? LeBron James. If you're not following all of this stuff, how are you going to get plugged in to American culture? They can be quite xenophobic in America. So you will experience the xenophobia from Mexicans. You'll experience the xenophobia from the African Americans. You'll experience xenophobia from the white Americans, the Irish Americans. It's not exactly a good deal if you think about it. But let's go somewhere where I want us to go. How did we get here? What's the background? How did we get here? Here's the background of the story. The Expropriation Act was the final straw. I don't know whether it was AfriForum or Solidarity. Whatever happened when that Expropriation Act was signed, that is what caused all of this commotion to move into fast forward. So here's what happened. January 20, 2025, on the first day of his second term, Donald Trump was signing executive orders like a man on fire. He was signing them like a man on fire. On that day, Trump issued an executive order called Realigning the United States Refugee Admissions Program. In that executive order, he suspended the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program indefinitely. And that had the effect of canceling more than 10,000 scheduled refugee flights and stranding at least 22,000 approved refugees, including Afghans and families of U.S. military personnel. That's what happened on day one of Trump 2.0. 3 days later, in South Africa, on the 23rd of January, President Cyril Ramaphosa signed the Expropriation Act. That's something that caused a lot of drama because 13 days later, on the 2nd of January, Donald Trump went onto social media and attacked South Africa. The next day, there was a phone call between the president of South Africa and Elon Musk. He was trying to sort things out, Mr. Ramaphosa, and that call was arranged by Benjani Chauke. Apparently, he spoke to Errol Musk. Errol Musk gave them Elon's number. There were calls, etc., etc. 20 days later, on the 7th of February, Donald Trump signed the executive order addressing the egregious actions of the Republic of South Africa. The order stated the following. Section 4. It said the following: refugee resettlement and other humanitarian considerations. The Secretary of State and the Secretary of Homeland Security shall take appropriate steps consistent with law to prioritize humanitarian relief, including admission and resettlement through the United States Refugee Admissions Program for Afrikaners in South Africa who are victims of unjust racial discrimination. This week of 17 May, 96 days later, we are at the point where the first group is about to live and go to America and become Amerikaners, right? Not Afrikaners, Amerikaners, right? So let's talk about Trump for a moment. One thing about Donald Trump is that he will move fast. This guy will move fast. Trump consistently shows how the system is being made to run on slow mode, either by lazy politicians, by dishonest politicians, by people in the swamp, however you want to look at it. He shows the problem with contemporary politicians. And that's something that I begrudgingly admire him for, because I don't sometimes agree with his politics. I think probably agree with 30% of Donald Trump's politics. I don't want to pretend like I don't agree with everything Trump says, but I'm probably 30% because I'm not in his worldview as much as maybe hardcore conservatives or mega people are, or whatever the case may be. But one thing I begrudgingly respect him for is that he will move fast and he will honor his commitments to his base. And he will even put the whole economy at risk if he thinks that the principle is worth it. Trump has shown that the problem with contemporary politicians is that they promise and they never try. They promise and they never try. They promise and they lie. They would rather even die than deliver on their promises. Let me show you something. Look at the Zondo Commission, for example. That commission ended long ago. Advocate Pretorius was on TV last week saying that he's been waiting for his application to be approved by the NPA for over 7 months so that he can begin to help them with the prosecutions on that. Nobody has really faced any consequences for state capture. Nobody. Assuming you buy everything said about state capture, I think that there are new versions of state capture. I think that the state capture narrative was exaggerated to remove Jacob Zuma, but that's a story for another day. Looking at what was submitted at the commission, there's been no action. Someone is waiting for 7 months. In 96 days, Donald Trump said, I'm going to give Afrikaners refugee status. It's happened in that short space of time, starting from his signing of the executive order and all of the dynamics that played out after that. Think about that. Think about those dynamics. Think about all of that. So while I do commend Trump for honoring his word and trying to execute, a legitimate question has been asked specifically about whether this refugee status is being awarded too fast to the Afrikaners. Because in South Africa, for example, a police clearance takes 3 months to be processed. So from the time that Donald Trump signed the executive order up until now, it's 96 days. How is this, how did every applicant get police clearance? Did they already have it maybe because they were applying for other stuff? So some people, even just asking objectively, are saying, was there enough time to vet the claims of the asylum seekers, to vet their backgrounds and make sure that everybody who is trying to get into America actually is somebody who is fit and proper to be in America and doesn't actually pose a threat to other Americans? Because at what point do they get all of the paperwork that they would need? Look, typically the American visa process is a fast process, but a refugee process is a more thorough process. They also have to look at whether you've actually been racially discriminated against, etc. So assuming and taking at face value that the American bureaucrats who are tasked with this obligation are looking at everything rationally, fairly, and trying to make sure that they get actually people who have been discriminated against, this potentially could have been done way too quickly. Even though Trump is a man who likes to move fast, this is not the type of thing that you move fast on. It takes some people were waiting years to become refugees, even after the withdrawal from Afghanistan by Joe Biden. If you think about those particular groups of people who've been waiting. So that's how we got there. There are some people who are challenging this idea of whether the Afrikaner people who are now being granted refugee status are real refugees. And one of those vocal entities is the Department of International Relations in South Africa. So think about this. There's a war in Sudan right now. Over 20,000 people have been killed in the war, and there are hundreds of thousands of people who've been displaced. We don't talk enough about what's going on in Sudan, but let me give you a quick summary. The country was under the control of the dictator Omar al-Bashir from 1989 until 2019. Late in 2018, people started protesting because there was a fuel price increase amongst various other cost of living issues. They were also opposed to the regime. Those protests continued into 2019 and they kept gaining momentum. And in April of 2019, the Bashar regime fell. It was a major moment, but it was facilitated in part by the fact that the army did not back up Bashir at that time. Two particular entities, the Sudanese Armed Forces and the Rapid Support Forces, folded their arms. They had already decided that it was their time now to rule, right? So the Sudanese Armed Forces are led by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, and the Rapid Support Forces are led by Mohamed Hamdan Hemeti Dagalo. Hemeti is a notorious leader in Sudan who has been implicated in the commission of genocides in Darfur. These two groups took over power from a transitional council in 2021 in a coup, basically, because Sudan was supposed to be led by a transitional council, then go to elections. Late in 2021, these guys were like, nah, it's ours now. We're taking over, these two military groups. In 2023, the leaders of these two rival factions of the army went to war against each other, and Sudan has been decimated. It's a war zone. The Rapid Support Forces, these are the powerful paramilitary group which emerged from the Bashar era, and they evolved from this Arab majority militia which was funded by Bashir to suppress southern Sudanese rebels and fight in the Darfur War. That's how they came into this kind of power and influence. And right now, people are saying that they are being supported by the UAE. And obviously, the Sudanese Armed Forces are the army of Sudan, which has existed in various formations since, Sudan has been operating as an independent entity. So, as things stand right now, thousands of people have been killed in Sudan. Thousands more have been displaced. Hundreds of thousands have been displaced. The people of Sudan cannot apply to be refugees in America. They're being killed every day. But Afrikaner South Africans can apply. This leads to the question, what is a refugee? It's not an abstract question. It's not an arbitrary question. It's not a subjective question. It's a real question under international law with a body of cases which have long been established. Are white Afrikaner South Africans refugees? Can they make that case? The definition of a refugee under the 1951 Refugee Convention, a refugee is defined as a person who, owing to a well-founded fear of being persecuted, well-founded fear, that's criteria number one, of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group or political opinion, is outside their country of nationality and is unwilling or unable to avail themselves of its protection. The question then would be, is there a well-founded fear of persecution? Well-founded means it has to be rational. It has to be objective. It has to be substantiated. Is the Employment Equity Act a well-founded fear? Is the Expropriation Act a well-founded fear? Are the high levels of crime in South Africa well-founded fears of persecution? Let's have a conversation about this. Objectively, let's have a conversation about this. International refugee law guarantees key rights and protections. The cornerstone is the principle of refoulement and non-refoulement in particular. No state may expel or return a refugee to a territory where their life or freedom would be threatened. So you can't, once you get this refugee status, go back. Can't go back. Once you take it, you take it. It's now yours. If you go back, you lose it. You lose it. So this is one of the reasons why I think people haven't taken up this refugee status thing, because they would like to move to America, but the refugee status then says you must live in America forever. If you leave, come back to South Africa, then it's over. So refugees have a lot of rights. Refugees lawfully in a country gain specific entitlements. For example, the right to engage in wage-earning employment under the most favorable treatment accorded to nationals of a foreign country, and that's Article 17, and similar preferential treatment for self-employment and professional practice. So you may be wondering, what is this most favorable treatment thing that I'm talking about? The concept of most favorable treatment in refugee law refers to the obligation of states to afford refugees treatment that is at least as favorable as that given to other non-citizens in similar circumstances, and in some cases equal to that given to nationals. So basically, you get the same treatment as a green card holder if you do not get the same treatment as an American citizen. There's a lot of privileges there. So I want to ask you, what do you think about this situation? Is it fair? Is it fair? There are people, for instance, who worked with American soldiers in Afghanistan. Afghanis, they worked with Americans and they were promised that they will be helped. And now their lives are in danger from the Taliban because Trump has canceled the refugee program for everyone except for white South Africans. Those people could be killed. Is that fair? There are people dying in Sudan, and Sudan is not the only place. There are people who have a well-founded fear of persecution in Haiti. But they're black, so maybe Trump doesn't care? I don't know. I'm just trying to stay objective about this. Is an Afrikaner more at risk than someone living in Sudan from crime? Who's more persecuted? Who's more persecuted? I'm just asking the questions. Just asking the questions. Is this fair? Is this fair? Those people who are in Afghanistan right now. So did you see when the American soldiers were leaving Afghanistan, some people were trying to cling on to the plane to leave. That's how afraid they were. They were not flying Fly-Safair from Joburg to Cape Town every day. They were so desperate they were trying to cling on to the plane. And they can't get refugee status now to America. So this is something to think about. So the Department of International Relations has issued a statement on this. And what they've said is the following. We reiterate that allegations of discrimination are unfounded. The South African Police Service statistics on farm-related crimes do not support allegations of violent crime targeted at farmers generally or any particular race. There are sufficient structures available within South Africa to address concerns of discrimination. Moreover, even if there are allegations of discrimination, it is our view that these do not meet the threshold of persecution required under domestic and international refugee law. So that's what the Department of International Relations has said, because they have to challenge this. It affects their reputation, South Africa's reputation, if this becomes a narrative that is accepted by the global community. Although I think many in the global community, Europe in particular, which has also got strong refugee law, is not looking at this with the same level of, conviction that the Trump administration may be. Here are my final remarks on this. 49 people is a low adoption rate, considering that we have over 1 million Afrikaners living in South Africa, right? If you think about that number, 49, it's low. Trump genuinely thinks he's helping Afrikaners and offering them something that many people around the world dream of. He's giving them the ultimate prize. In his opinion, access to America. Access to America, that's the prize. That's why he built a wall so that Mexicans can't get that prize. He wants people from Norway, from European countries to be able to get that prize, to build with them. This is what he has done. He's offered that to white South Africans. What is he going to do if this program has less than 1,000 people taking it up in the next year? What is he going to think if his great gift to white South Africans is rejected or snubbed? We've already seen AfriForum saying, no, we want sanctions, etc., etc. Now, I think by now we all know that Donald Trump does not like being embarrassed. He'll be asked about this by the media, particularly if those numbers are not adding up to high adoption, while thousands of people are dying in different parts of the world where America used to offer refugee status to. Right? He's historically done well on issues of immigration because there's a large number of Americans who want tougher immigration laws. So he doesn't want to now lose his last issue because he just took a lot of flack on tariffs and Liberation Day and everything that happened where he had to back down. So this decision reasonably could end up leaving egg on his face if people don't pick it up. His supporters may ask him, supporters in the military, why he gave refugee status to rich white South Africans while not giving in to Afghanis who worked and fought with American soldiers on the battlefields in combat. Americans love veterans, and they love people who worked with veterans and helped those veterans. So there's a real risk here that Trump could end up being embarrassed and end up turning on the people he gave this offer to. Think about it. If Trump is embarrassed, he could do one of two things. One is keep the program running, shift to the sanctions that AfriForum and others have called for on various politicians in South Africa like Julius Malema and members of the ANC who've spoken up about the Expropriation Act or who they view as being worthy to target as to send a message. That's one option. Or he could turn on the lobby groups such as AfriForum and Solidarity. He could turn on them. If they embarrass Trump, like Trump is not a predictable person. He can do erratic things, but he can also lash out if he's angry at you. He can genuinely do that. So now if 49 people take up this offer and it's 49 people per month for the next 52 weeks, that's not going to be a lot of people. That's not going to be a lot of people. If it's less than 10,000 people, is he going to accept that as a viable? He just offered you, if Trump offered right now a lottery to 100,000 Mexicans, the next day that thing would have been filled by 1 million applications from Mexicans. They want to live in America. 49 is low. If it's 49 per month, maybe it will get adopted more. But I actually don't think people don't want to. I think people want to live. I don't think that's a big number of people want to live and go to America. America is very expensive. It's very difficult to integrate into America. It used to be the land where the American dream was very true for everyone, but now it's tough. American dream is now tough to access now. Look at the cost of living in places like LA. It's quite expensive. I've been to Los Angeles. I've been there. It's quite expensive. New York, I've been there. It's quite expensive to live in New York. I've been to Washington. I've been to Seattle. I've been to several of these places there. And I can tell you now, it will choke you to try to live in America if you don't have a good income. And that can be upwards of $80,000 a year that you need to get just to be on the bottom side of middle class. Many people are now saying that you need to be earning well over 6 figures to be considered to be middle class. 6 figures is $100,000, 2 million rands. Now, I don't think people want to do that anymore. I don't think people want to do that as much anymore, especially if you're already doing well in South Africa. It makes sense for someone from Sudan to take up that offer because those US dollars go far. Those US dollars go far if you still got family in Sudan, etc. They go far. It makes sense for someone who is in Haiti because there are gangs running amok in Haiti. Gangs are running amok there. You can't even guarantee that you will be able to walk on the streets, buy a loaf of bread and get back home in Haiti. It's dangerous. Now, I'm not saying that South Africa doesn't have a crime problem. It does. And that crime problem most manifests in places like Mfuleni, Khayelitsha, Langa, Umlazi, Westbury, dangerous neighborhoods. It doesn't manifest as much in Hermanus. It doesn't manifest as much in Stellenbosch. It doesn't manifest as much in Somerset West, where Rupert lives. One of the safest neighborhoods, South Africa. doesn't manifest as much in Hyde Park. I'm not saying there's no crime in Hyde Park or Somerset West or Sea Point. I'm just saying it's not the same levels. These other communities have got CAP and ADT and all of this stuff. So in as much as, yes, life is dangerous in South Africa, the danger is not evenly distributed. And crime affects everyone. I don't think it's racially motivated. It's motivated by the fact that there's a large number of people who are living in extreme poverty. Some of them opt out of the system and decide that they're going to do whatever it takes to get by. And it's unfortunate because it points to the failures of government to provide economic opportunities and good protection for everybody, and the low numbers of police that are present. But I don't think that this is a situation where people can genuinely say that they are refugees. I don't know, it's my opinion. What do you think? Let's have a conversation in the comments. I'll meet you there.